These are workers that are willing to go publicly toe-to-toe with management. It's us versus them. And this is what we're going to demand from you, and you're going to give it to us.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Luis Leon is a staff writer for Labor Notes, but he also writes for other outlets in whenever he finds free time. I don't know how he does that. And yesterday he dropped an article for The Real News. We love The Real News. You should check it out, therealnews.com. Our friend Maximilian Alvarez is the editor-in-chief over there. And yesterday, Luis dropped an article for them titled, "1 year after the failed Amazon union drive, workers in Bessemer are voting a second time." And it was really good. And I was wanting to talk about the election anyways, so I figured we'd bring Luis on. So that's what we did. Luis, welcome back to the program. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. And we didn't plan to coordinate our Labor Notes shirt colors today. So this is
you're wearing the same shirt as me? Oh, that's great.
This is a happy coincidence.
I almost wore mine today too, so we could have been 3 for 3. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Adam's really letting us down.
I know. I'm rocking the old NEA Peace and Justice Caucus, so I at least have the red shirt on with you guys. But
yeah, yes,
we love Labor Notes around here.
Yeah, no, we love you guys as well. So thanks for holding up the red flag. So at least you're wearing red.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Well, it's like an orange. I take that back. It's not quite red.
No, this is red. This
no,
is
not
red.
yours. Adam's.
Adams is, no, I think Adams is red.
It used to be red. This is faded. It's been a few years since this convention. So.
All right. Well, fair enough.
All right. So, let's talk about your article, and the big thing that you're trying to do with that article is kind of talking about the second round of the campaign and maybe ways that it's different from the first. And I think you were able to do a bit more on the ground kind of reporting for the first round, weren't you?
Yes. I went down to Alabama and interview workers outside of the Circle K gas station at 4 a.m. So yeah, I was on the ground. This time around, unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that, but I wanted to keep up with the story. It's an important election, and the fight of workers in the South, like, we got to support it.
Absolutely. So what do you think? What has it seemed to you watching the coverage and talking to folks? I'm sure that you've talked to people on the phone and stuff who are connected to the campaign. What has stuck out to you about the differences this time than last time?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first, before getting to that, what has changed? I think one of the first things that the first campaign did was build some infrastructure within this massive warehouse that they could build upon, right? So some of the leaders that, began the organizing last time around, people like Darrell Richardson, Jennifer Bates, they're still around. There were some people that were still around last time that have become more active, like Isaiah Thomas, who I interviewed and is quoted extensively in the piece. So I think based on what they were able to build, what they've been, what has accelerated, what has been ramped up, is the shop floor actions that workers are taking, right? So one of the first things that you want to do as a union at a company like Amazon, I'd say, is take up space within that company, right? Which is the strategy that, some of the Teamsters have said that they want to employ, is the strategy that Amazonians United has been employing in terms of these shop floor actions. I wrote a piece in Labor Notes about how they coordinated 3 walkouts, in New York City and in Maryland, at delivery stations, right? Delivery stations are much smaller, though, than a fulfillment center. So I think what the RWDSU and the workers in Bessemer are doing is, it's a even tougher fight because of how big the warehouse is and the massive number of people that work there. So one of the biggest shifts is just how aggressive they've gotten with the shop floor actions that they're taking, right? Confronting these anti-union consultants, marching under managers to make demands. Like, a union is only as strong as its workers. at Labor Notes, we emphasize that our task as organizers is to fight for democracy. And for us, democracy is power, which means that the more people are involved, the more we can exercise that power and press demands on the boss to meet our needs. So that doesn't happen once you get formal recognition. That happens from the moment you start organizing on the shop floor. So I think that there's a greater recognition of that this time around. And the things have changed. Like, I don't discount that, COVID definitely had an impact last time around. The timeline was much shorter. And, the fact that they already had this other union election, helped them get a foothold in the warehouse. So win or lose, they'll continue to build on that.
Right. And the why do you think it is that Amazon is continuing, even in this environment, continuing to flagrantly break the law and interfere with these workers' rights to organize? RWDSU has filed 3 ULPs, and one of them is a ULP to challenge precedent, right? But currently, under current case law, the captive audience meetings are legal. RWDSU is challenging that, but there are a couple other ULPs that they fired that are just blatant illegal conduct, and they're doing this in an environment where, as you point out, the new general counsel for the NLRB, Jennifer Abruzzo, she has, in your article, you say, quote, considerable power to set guidelines for the board's regional offices across the nation for dealing with cases before them. And among the new directives issued during her first months in office, Abruzzo revived a rule known as Joy Silk, which stipulates that a company deemed to have engaged in unfair labor practices for the purposes of blocking a union's organizing campaign can be ordered to recognize and bargain with that union if most workers had signed cards to affiliate and requested recognition from the company. That would be a big step, and Amazon is still breaking the law. Like, why do you think they're not being? Because it's easy. There's so many things that are legal. It would be really easy to just run a above board anti-union campaign. Why aren't they doing that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think it gets at just how much, like, how unleveled the playing field is, right, for workers. Like, I know sometimes folks talk about, like, I'm working on another piece around what happens in union elections, right? And it's like, I would describe them as like fascist dictatorships, right? Because it's not like the boss it's an equal player to like the union, right? Like, the boss workers are required to be at work. The employer has all that time to talk to them, to, hammer them with propaganda. The union has to appeal to workers outside of the warehouse, which is why the importance of rank and file unionism is so key, because it's not the union reaching out to people after work, it's workers themselves organizing among their coworkers, like Isaiah was doing before Amazon kind of like slapped him on the wrist with this no solicitation order, because they understand that they want total control over the workplace. And what Isaiah Thomas was challenging was precisely that. He was challenging the fact that Amazon wants to have total control over its warehouses. So in terms of elections, last time Amazon violated the law, what did it do, right? It had to send a notice telling workers that, like, basically it was a piece of paper, right? Like that was the consequence for what they did, right? Like they literally, changed the traffic lights in Bessemer. They installed the mailbox. Like
that's still one of the wildest incidents. Like to change the traffic lights just to minimize the amount of conversations that's right. Wild.
Right. But I mean, some of this stuff, I mean, as you folks know, like in terms of some of these things are standard, like union busting tactics, right? So I think it's important to not, also overemphasize them and make them out to be like, something like a new innovation.
It's impossible to overcome, right?
Well, I mean, I think I think
it's
that's
important
the challenge.
to make it. It's important to make these. It's important not to make these obstacles seem like they're impossible to overcome. Is what you're saying?
Are brand new.
Right. Well, yeah, it's both, right? They're not brand new. They are tried over and over again because they work. You instill fear in workers. You tell them, hey, we're going to move, like what happened at Nissan, right, in North Carolina, where they said, like, if you vote for a union, we're going to offshore, like you stoke fear, you're going to defeat a unionizing campaign, right? So, and then the other thing is that, yeah, they can be overcome through the kind of shop floor actions that Isaiah, that Dave Winant engaged in. That's the way to build power, as workers, is to talk to our coworkers and see that we are only as strong as we are when we come together and fight for the changes that we demand are necessary to make our workplaces dignified.
Right. And, you mentioned that shop floor action that people like Isaiah and other folks are taking. And you mentioned that in your piece. Quote, in January, Thomas and coworkers in the shipping dock department collected signatures on a petition demanding higher pay, longer breaks, better communication about their rate targets, stuff like that, and delivered that petition to management. And they got some of the things that they were asking for. They got new and more microwaves in the break room. They got more chairs in the break room. Like, these are not only are they taking these actions, but they're taking the actions and they're winning. And they're showing people that they can win. How do you are Isaiah and these other folks that you're talking to, are they saying that kind of stuff, showing the viability of collective action, that is making a difference in their coworkers' perception of the viability of a union writ large?
Yeah, I mean, that's another good question. I mean, I think we see it in terms of, like, if you remember last time around, in terms of the rally that I went down to Alabama, it was pouring rain, and you look at how many people came out. There wasn't as public of a campaign of union support, right? So what these shop floor actions do is that they serve to some degree as a structure test. It tells the union, hey, these are workers that are willing to go publicly toe-to-toe with management and have an oppositional relationship to management. Not some business unionism bullshit that we're partners with management, but saying it's us versus them. And this is what we're going to demand from you, and you're going to give it to us. So that not only builds power, but it also sends clear information to the union that workers are ready to fight. So it may seem, a person that has not perhaps been involved in campaigns may look at an action around a microwave and chairs, right? And they might be like, that's like, okay, like what does that mean? What it means is that what ultimately these workers are fighting for is control over their workplace. So the right to have a say. So one of the things that Isaiah emphasized was this idea that, Amazon stifles workers' voices. And that's something that to some degree people say, and it becomes a talking point. But in Amazon, there's real weight behind that, just because of how much control the company wants to exert. Like the last time around, time off task, right? When workers were penalized for not meeting productivity quotas, that was a big thing for workers, right? So that means that's like talking about auto workers protesting, fighting against speed up. This is what it's about. So I think we are seeing a more public campaign of support for the union than we did last time. So I mentioned briefly, and the picture for this article is photographs of workers saying, I'm voting union yes. So that it's also, a structure test of how willing workers are to go up against the boss when they publicly put their names out there. So I mean, I'm not like a big fan of like the technocratic unionism of like saying you must check off these boxes, because if that were the case, if there were a perfect formula and we just, used it, like, we would have like, I don't know, 70% unionization rate in this country, but that's not the case, right? But there's some nuts and bolts things that do work, right? It does work to talk to your coworkers. One of the things that I lightly criticized was the whole idea of like treating union elections like U.S. congressional races, right? Where you have a bunch of people coming in, high headliner endorsements and so forth. You know, the most important thing is Isaiah talking to his coworkers. And that's why Amazon, you know, like responded so aggressively against it, wrote him up, gave him a warning, because they realized that it's not Bernie Sanders flying down to Alabama that's going to win this. It's Isaiah and thousands of other workers at that warehouse talking with one another and building power together.
Right. And, you know, the picture campaign on social media that you mentioned is something that is, it's like amazing to me. I mean, every day they've got like a dozen pictures of new people that have a RWDSU shirt on and this big sign saying, "I'm voting union yes because," and it gives their reasons why, right, you know, and that's a big deal, right? To be willing to put your name out there, your face out there, and saying, "I'm going to vote for the union. I'm going to vote to be a union. I am," you know, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And showing, and, you know, the more their coworkers see people taking these actions, the more they are likely to take these actions, right? The more comfortable they're going to feel voting yes, voting to unionize, and maybe taking these actions themselves, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly right. I mean, I think when we see people come out, it gives us courage to also come out and stand with those folks, right? I think it's very hard to run like an underground campaign with a few leaders, with just, you know, off-site meetings that people come to, like an underground organizing committee that no one knows or has met. Like, you know, that's hard. I get that in different phases of a campaign, like that's necessary. And like I said, right, I think the other campaign, the other vote, like had certain like real restrictions. But I do think there was a deliberate change in strategy. Like we haven't seen, like I just mentioned, the high profile supporters, you know, we haven't seen that as take as much of space as it did before. And maybe that was because of COVID, right? They couldn't go out to knock on people's doors. So they said, you know, we're going to rely on social media, on, you know, just the media to get the message out. The thing is, when I spoke to people at Circle K and I asked them, you know, what are you reading? They were reading the local paper in Alabama. You know, they weren't reading the New York Times. So you gotta think about what is the information that's going to get to these workers, not to sympathizers outside of the warehouse. The workers that matter the most are the ones that are working side by side with Isaiah. The folks that need to be inoculated against these talking points, these scare tactics by Amazon, are those folks on the shop floor, not somebody else outside of it. As much as that support would help, it's not going to help, you know, in terms of winning a campaign. So I think
right,
there was some reflection on that.
Yeah, because, I mean, we can't vote yes as much as we, you know, support the effort, and as much as, you know, the public and community support is important. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're not voting. Those folks are. Right.
And you know, you mentioned the fact that, you know, media coverage and Bernie Sanders coming, that's not going to get somebody to vote yes. And that seems really, that point seems to me to be really driven home by the fact that there was a poll released recently of Jefferson County residents, and it was something like 70% of the people there supported the union campaign. And obviously there was a partisan breakdown there, 49% of Republicans and like 80% of Democrats, 70-80% of black folks did, and 60% of white folks. And then, you know, and it was like a similar thing last time as far as the community. I think that there was a similar poll last year about the community support for the campaign, but the people actually inside the facility, the ones that voted, they were, even though by demographics, their demographics are even more like the people that support the union in the broader community, meaning, Amazon workers are more likely to be women, are more likely to be minorities, are more likely to be black than Jefferson County as a whole. And those are the communities that supported, that didn't work there, that supported the campaign. And yet the folks that actually worked there ended up voting really heavily against the campaign. And that speaks to the fact that, the outside media, whatever, people talking about it outside the workplace, somebody coming down and saying you should vote for it, that's not actually what is going to convince people. It's what's happening in their lives. It's what they're seeing on the shop floor. And what they saw on the shop floor last year was management harassing them, was management retaliating against the union campaign. There wasn't very many RWDSU shirts in the plant. There wasn't very much support coming from workers, publicly. And so that's kind of what workers saw. And so workers were not unreasonably scared. And the folks that I've talked to, they said that it seems to me that the feeling in the shop is different this time. What are your thoughts about that? I know I kind of rambled for
that was good. That was good. I mean, there's a lot there. Let me take one step back before answering that question, right? So one thing that people sometimes neglect to mention, and you folks know this because you're local, and is that Alabama had, in terms of southern states, it has one of the highest unionization rates, right? And at one point it was above 10%. Since 2008, it's been on a steady decline. Now it's 5.9 or something. I forgot what I quoted in the article. But the point is that there's still a living memory of people being in unions, of people knowing what unions can do, when workers come together and form them, what kind of dignified life a union can afford a person, right? So there's that, and that's important to understand, right? We're talking about, and Bessemer and the going back to the steel industry, that's still within living memory. It doesn't guarantee you that you're going to win, of course, because in another article, I didn't quote this from Dale, but Dale came from a similar warehousing thing where warehouse operation, not an Amazon company, where he was earning, I believe he said about $12. And then he went to Amazon, right? He got a pay boost to $15.80. So the idea that workers felt okay, industry and union jobs have been, auto parts plants have been closing. The ones that are open are non-union, where it's very dangerous. And there's studies that show, in comparison to Detroit, where auto parts plants are unionized, the accident rates are twice the national average in Alabama. So folks are saying, here are my options. They're making a judgment. So while it's true that unionized warehouses have paid higher wages, it is not true that, folks in other warehouses are earning less. They're earning less, and Amazon represents a pay boost. Now, what has happened from the last campaign to now? We have seen workers more aggressively demanding increases in pay. We had the Great Resignation. We had, the John Deere strike. So we've had all these things that indicate that workers have strong bargaining power. So while maybe a year ago, $15 an hour was okay, that's pretty good. Now they're that's not enough because of inflation, because of all the things that have happened, right? So I think that might also, that's a hypothesis, right? Because I would like to talk to a more representative sample of the workers to say that's what's really on people's mind. And I just haven't done that, right? So my conversations were off the record with other folks, that are close to it, and with workers. So from that, what I can say is that there's definitely been somewhat of a shift in terms of how folks are seeing this unionization campaign and Amazon's tactics. So I note in the article that the turnover, as high as it is at other warehouses, at this warehouse in Alabama, it wasn't 150%. It was more like 50%. So that means that you have 50% of people that went through this last time and are already prepared for what to expect. They already saw that Amazon said, if you vote against this union, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And they saw Amazon not do that, right? So I think that also plays a role in how in how people are willing to say, you know what? I'm seeing people fight for this and getting what they want. A union can fight, and we are the union. And if we fight, we can make some changes here, right? So I think that has registered in people's minds. So I don't know, Jacob, if that gets at your question. Sorry for the preamble to get to that point.
No. I think you matched my preamble word for word. So.
That was very important. It is important to note that Jefferson County does have a strong union history that's in living memory, and I think it is important to reflect on how the conditions have changed inside the warehouse and just in the broader economy around it in just 1 year's time. So I hope all that bodes well for the union campaign.
So, there is a lot of other organizing happening at Amazon across the country, and you referred to that, some of that in the article, and you've written some more stuff about that. The Amazon Labor Union is closer to you. You're a Yankee. You're from New York. And
we won't hold that against you.
We won't
Not
hold that
at all.
against you. And that's closer to you. That's in New York. And there's 2 elections that the Amazon Labor Union is conducting now. And you mentioned Amazonians United. How do you see the state of organizing at Amazon at these other places? Like, can you give us, because I haven't kept up with that as much as, obviously the Bessemer's in my backyard, right? So what's been going on, and what are the connections, you think?
Yeah, I follow more closely Amazonians United in terms of the work that they've been doing, and they've been doing this since, they've been doing this for a while. So they have been building infrastructure similar to what I described as possibly the RWDSU strategy, right? Like, even if, let's say, this vote doesn't go in their favor, they're continuing to take up more space and build infrastructure in the warehouse, right? They know that this is a long fight. This is not something that's going to happen, from 1 year to 1 year's time. And even if they were to win, the path to a contract would be very difficult with just one fulfillment center. So,
and just really quickly before the rest of your answer, it's worth noting that RWDSU is an affiliate of UFCW, which does have an institutional memory of doing this, of going 3 or 4 rounds to win a big shop. That happened in Smithfield in North Carolina, I believe. They went 3 or 4 rounds over 15 years and finally won a contract there. So this is a union that has shown a willingness to continue investing in campaigns, in workers organizing against really tall odds.
Absolutely. And I think we have to, as a movement, we have to recognize that, right? Like, there are no shortcuts. Right. This is a fight for the long haul. And what that means, if the fight is for the long haul, that means that it's not a staff-driven, operation, that you're really building workers' democracy in these workplaces. And it builds up, an oppositional culture of us versus them, which is what I find so impressive and moving about what Amazon workers are doing in Alabama. To your point about Amazonians United, right? I feel like they have also been building, their base of power in different delivery stations, stretching all the way to Canada, right? So these delivery stations employ at most 100 people. right? And it's just an easier place to organize. And strategically, you can really hamper Amazon's whole operations and its promise that you're going to get your same day delivery, your 2-day delivery on time, right? Because that's the last mile from, when someone at a fulfillment center packs an order and then is sorted and sent out to be picked up and delivered to someone's doorstep. That's a key role. That's a key node in the supply chain. So I think they're doing really impressive, really great work. They are not affiliated with an official union. They are kind of like a throwback to the auto workers and the CIO. The other union that you mentioned in Staten Island, I haven't followed as much. So I obviously support any worker that's fighting for dignity in the workplace, but I haven't followed it as closely. So I can't say much about them and what they're doing. I mean, they're holding elections at 2 warehouses. That's what I know. But I can't speak to like their organizing. I can't say like I can about Amazonians United and about RWDSU. Like there's some real organizing happening. There's even if the odds are really tall, they are doing a heck of a good job, at supporting one another. The union as well, in terms of RWDSU's case, hasn't packed up and say, on to the next hot shop, like they are making a real investment in time and resources to support these workers in their fight. And that's what the labor movement needs to do.
Right. And the Amazonians United, not only are they fighting, it's important to commend people for fighting and because that's a big step, right? But they're also winning. I saw on their Twitter they screen capped a pay stub or an announcement or something of that showed that workers at one delivery center got a $2 or $3 an hour raise as the result of a walkout or a series of walkouts that they, so they're winning and they're winning. Like a $2 or $3 an hour raise is like significant, and they're doing that without being officially recognized. They're doing that without like bargaining for a contract. They just took an action with that as the demand, and they were met with that. I mean, that's impressive.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think they've been winning all along for a very, they won hazard pay, and they started, I mentioned earlier that someone may be dismissive of the microwave thing, right? But, Amazonians United, during like one sweltering summer in Chicago, they fought to get water. Like they marched on the boss because they didn't have cold water. So this is about showing each other that there is power when we come together. As I know it's a cliche line that we say in the labor movement, like when we fight, we win. When we stand together, we win. But it's true. Right. We literally do. And, solidarity is not something that is believed because it is said. It is something that must be experienced. So if you are on the line with a coworker and they're freaking dehydrated, and then you go to another coworker and they're dehydrated, you go and you talk together. What should we do about this? And you decide to march on the boss. That's a demonstration of solidarity and our collective power. And that's what we need to show each other more of, right? Like we live in a highly individualistic society where it's like, each person for themselves. But when we break through that by fighting for something, fighting for each other, we put a dent in that ideological grip, put a dent. I'm mixing my metaphors there, but we loosen the grip on that ideological, hold.
I think that is so powerful there. Solidarity can't just be heard. It has to be felt. And the issues you're talking about, they are the things that affect people on a very visceral level. And it reminds me of a conversation I just had this week with a worker at Walmart who was upset that they had pulled the water away from their station. And this is the folks who go out and get the buggies in the parking lot, and they're in and out all day. And, they don't have a good reason why the water was pulled, but they know that They used to have it. It's not provided anymore. It's not convenient for them anymore to have the water. They may have to purchase water from their employer. It's, but that's something that, this guy really felt, it's his first job, a teenager, and he's already getting this real world education, unfortunately, about what happens when there is no counterbalance to the power of management.
Right.
When, arbitrary actions can be taken against you and your coworkers for no reason or for bad reasons or for any reason at all, and you don't have the ability yet to do something about that. And that's what's inspiring about these workers at Amazon, who I think are leading the way for so many folks in industries that aren't currently organized, that you can do something about it. That when you work together, you can change your lives.
And, to speak to the about just having water or having enough microwaves or having enough chairs to sit down, there have been like surveys of working folks that have shown that, as much as, wages and working conditions and things like that matter, one of the top things that is going to actually keep a worker at a place is if they feel like they are treated well. And if they're not treated well, even if they've got good wages or good benefits or what, there has been research showing that they're going to leave if they don't feel like they're being treated as a human being. And so this is something that managers are taught to try to keep unions out, like, oh, look, if you, that's why, the pizza parties are a meme because they're so commonly used because like people like pizza, right? And you, to a certain extent, you can kind of pacify people with these small gestures of like, oh, look, I care about you, right? And on the other hand, workers can do the same thing. Workers can take advantage of all it takes to really, helping people get a small win, a small change that makes them feel better is going to make them feel better about the union. And workers can take advantage of that to build power for themselves instead of for the boss.
Yeah. I mean, as long as it's about like meaningful, engagement, like I think, I agree with you that workers want to have a voice in their workplace. They also want to collaborate and work together, right? And sometimes management comes up with these schemes where they are in the room and they're the ones that are structuring like the collaboration. And what happens is that workers are collaborating with management on their own exploitation. Or workers, let's say I've written a couple of articles with my colleague Dan, who Jacob interviewed for when I was on my birthday celebrating. And, when you think about auto plants in Mexico, right, and workers here in the U.S., management comes up with these schemes that says, in order for U.S.-based workers to be competitive with workers in Mexico, we must partner with the company. And that means that we're going to give up our 8-hour workday and work mandatory overtime. That means that we are going to give up our Sunday off, So it becomes like this low road like thinking of like let's drag down our standards to the level of where workers are at in Mexico or any other part of the world, instead of saying let's fight with our Mexican colleagues, our workers all over the world to lift the standards so that there's no safe haven for exploitation, right?
Bingo,
like that's not the that's thinking.
Huge. That is so huge to work together across these lines so that there's no safe haven for exploitation. I think that says a lot.
Right. So I think the same thing would be required for Amazon, right? Like I use the auto. But to stay on topic here about Amazon, Amazon is a multinational, corporation. And, this is going to require international solidarity as well.
Right. Well, Louise, I really appreciate your time. That was a really good piece. Folks got to go check it out. There's a lot more in there that we didn't get to, a lot of quotes from workers. The title is 1 Year After the Failed Amazon Union Drive, Workers in Bessemer Are Voting a Second Time. You can find that on the Real News Network, therealnews.com. Really good place. Great article. Louise, thanks so much for taking the time today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right. Yeah, so we've been talking to Luis Leon. He wrote that article for The Real News. It's really great. Check it out.
And I'm going to take this opportunity to plug Labor Notes, where Louise writes. Normally, they are having a training series in April. They do this pretty regular, but they have an online training series going through Secrets of a Successful Organizer. I know we've talked about that on the show before. I believe for like $15, you can get into all 3 sessions, but they're not going to turn anybody away, in my experience. Let's see if I have those dates here. It's coming up. April 4th is going to be the first one, and then the 11th and the 18th. They're all at 6:30 p.m. You can do it, from the convenience of your phone or computer. But if you'd like to get more in the nuts and bolts of how do you actually organize, how do you have organizing conversations with people, where do you get started, this would be a great outlet for you. So just wanted to plug that, especially seeing you and Louise both with your Troublemakers Union shirt on. If you want to learn how to be a certified troublemaker and do it effectively, this is a great training for you.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.